because I'm not a climate scientist. You know, I was a student like many of you out there for 8 years of my life studying physics. So I can remember back when climate science, it used to be considered a very respected field of science. But about 20 years ago, it began to deteriorate. And while I am not a climate scientist, I do consider myself an informed critic. I've been involved in the trying to understand what's been going on in climate science for the last 15 years. And most importantly, I believe in climate and scientific principles, if you will. Now, our home planet may appear kind of fragile from space, but it is really plain how well humans have adapted to the continuous climate change over the last million years. And we will continue to adjust to that in the future. Now, I'm not here to argue the scientific case against human-caused global warming, or anthropogenic warming, or AGW, or climate change, or climate disruption, or whatever is the current phrase that they're being used by the alarmists to claim of human-caused global warming. Now, these are all code words for governmental control of energy consumption and, consequently, our standard of living. Global warming alarmists, they focus, global warming alarmists focus on the small temperature increase since the Industrial Revolution, and they hypothesize that we humans are controlling the temperature of our planet. Well, they've sold the media and the public on something that they invented called consensus science. And the media has bought into human-caused global warming. Those of us who are skeptical of the alarmist claims are characterized as climate deniers or fake experts or against climate change. When everyone I know believes in climate change, climate has been changing. So instead of the alarmists presenting data to prove their hypothesis, they challenge skeptics like me to disprove their hypothesis. Well, while scientists are best qualified to deal with the scientific and academic aspects of this question, we all of us here have to deal with the financial consequences of any actions taken based on bad science. And today's war on global warming is a fight to avoid the economic destruction of our society and the lowering of our standard of living. Well, I'm going to start here to loosen things up with the only evidence I have found that might support the alarmist cause, the alarmist case of the temperature warming. So some of you will appreciate that. And the temperature of our planet has been changing for the last 4.8 billion years. Well, let's see if we can get off of that. And you've just heard from a professor, I believe, telling you some of these things. But the last time the temperature and the carbon dioxide levels were simultaneously both this low was about 300 million years ago. And about 500 million years ago, if you look on that chart, you can see that the carbon dioxide level was about 15 times higher than it is today. And if you just go back and look at the last 2,000 years of the climate, there were many, many times when the temperature was higher than it is today. The red line you see over there at the right, that's the phony hockey stick forecast that was made some years back. The public really doesn't know what to believe about human-caused global warming. The alarmists have been hammering at us now for almost 30 years, and most of the media are true believers. Politicians, in the absence of knowledge and understanding about climate science, have put themselves out on a limb, and that's a limb from which they find it very difficult to retreat. Empirical data collected over centuries established what we would call a provisional theory of climate change. Scientists have long known that the sun, the oceans, and variations in the Earth's orbit are the principal drivers of climate change. And while we may not fully understand all of the mechanisms or interactions involved, after hundreds of years it became the accepted theory of climate change. Well, scientists have also always questioned accepted theories, even those that evolved over centuries. So it's not surprising that some people were challenging that. But for a new hypothesis, to modify or replace an accepted theory, it must be supported by the appropriate data. And back in the 1980s, a small group of individuals became concerned about the Earth's temperature and what it might do in the future. I hesitate to call those folks scientists because they've abandoned the scientific principles by which their guess about future temperature increases and its cause could achieve scientific acceptance or rejection. They hypothesized that warmer temperatures were a threat, that carbon dioxide levels were abnormally high, and that higher levels of carbon dioxide were bad for humanity, that warmer temperatures will be worse for the world, and that humans were capable of overriding natural forces to control the Earth's temperature. Only a couple of years sooner, just earlier than that, some of those same scientists were arguing that the imminent threat was global cooling, and it would eventually trigger an ice age. And I will say they were closer to reality with that particular thought. Their new hypothesis that human-caused carbon dioxide was responsible for global temperature increases, that was a challenge to the accepted theory of climate change. And for a new hypothesis to be accepted by the scientific community, it must be confirmed by considerable evidence, and it also must survive all attempts to disprove it. Well, the hypothesis that human-generated carbon dioxide is a principal driver of the Earth's temperature has not satisfied either of these criteria. However, too many people today are unable to distinguish between science and non-science. The alarmist hypothesis gained immediate traction with the media and eventually with many politicians. In the absence of supporting data, alarmists are appealing to the public, where politics, media, and money play important roles. Well, this is a controversy that should not be resolved in the court of public opinion or in the political arena. It should be resolved in the court of scientific inquiry and based on empirical data. Alarmists like to refer to the correlation between temperature and carbon dioxide levels. Well, here's some empirical data going back 130 years. Now, if you look at those two charts, is there a closer correlation between temperature and carbon dioxide or between temperature and solar activity? Besides, you need to know, correlation is not causation. If it was, look at this chart. It's a chart about the number of pirates. It shows the number of pirates decreasing over time while the temperature was increasing. Why aren't the alarmists today telling us that we can reduce the Earth's temperature by increasing the pirate industry? And if you want to take a look at if you want to look at causation, temperatures have changed over many years and carbon dioxide levels, but the temperature changes have preceded the carbon dioxide levels by those changes by 500 to 800 years. And that observation was much more consistent with the existing physical laws and the existing theory of climate change. The one things that alarmists are able to cite, and will cite to you in support of their simplistic hypotheses, are those mathematical models which they developed to prove that human-caused carbon dioxide is a dominant factor in controlling the Earth's temperature. Well, unfortunately, their climate models have never successfully predicted anything. Models are based on assumptions, which are opinions. And if the bases for the assumptions are wrong, then the results can never accurately predict future behavior. We should all emphasize that models are not data. You need to tell people who believe in that. Models are not data. We realists, we focus on empirical data and the scientific process, neither of which support the hypothesis that alarmists have dreamed up.